Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into a life you probably really don't want. Imagine this. You're standing in a cold, dripping chamber beneath a drafty stone fortress. There's no natural light, the air smells like old iron and fear, and in front of you lies a set of tools that definitely didn't come from IKEA. There's a knock at the door. It's your new supervisor. He smiles, hands you a branding iron, and says, "Welcome aboard. You just got hired as a medieval torturer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Are you up late in Chicago or early rising in Brisbane? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not exactly sure how this happened. Maybe you were caught stealing a loaf of bread and offered a choice. Lose a hand or gain a job. Or maybe your uncle knew a guy. Either way, here you are, in a tunic that smells like mildew and a new job description that involves more screaming than an amusement park. And surprise, no training manual. The guy who had the job before you? Probably dead. Probably not of natural causes. You trudge in cautiously, stepping over puddles you really hope are just water. In the flickering torchlight, your orientation begins. It involves a tour of the torture chamber, walls lined with shackles, racks, and strange wooden contraptions that look like someone lost a bet with geometry. Your guide, a former monk who found his calling, chuckles darkly every time he names a device. There's the rack, of course. Classic. Stretch people like taffy. The thumbscrews, small but mighty. The heretic's fork, a real conversation starter. You'll learn as you go, he says, cheerfully handing you a bucket of salt. You thought the worst part would be inflicting pain. But no, it's the awkwardness. The long silences before a scream, the part where you ask someone if they'd kindly confess to something they didn't do, and the weird social etiquette of offering someone a drink before strapping them in. Some executioners get to wear hoods, anonymity, and all. You? Nope. Your face is known. That'll be a problem later. Now here's a fun twist. Your job isn't just physical. It's also administrative. Yes, really. You must document everything. Who was tortured? Why? How long? What they confessed? What you did with the body if they, stopped cooperating via death. And the ink you use? Spoiler, it's not always ink. Just imagine trying to write legibly while someone's eyeball is rolling across the floor. There's a strange kind of camaraderie in the dungeon. The rats nod in recognition. The skeletons keep you company. And then there's your boss, a robed man with cold hands and colder morals. He tells you God approves of your work, but also finds you if you break the suspect too fast. Torture with purpose, he mutters. Sure, like there's a handbook for efficient torment. Historians still argue whether medieval torturers truly believed they were doing holy work, or if it was just a grim paycheck in a violent age. But belief or not, you're now in this. And there's no HR department to complain to. And the pay? Don't expect riches. You might get a few silver pennies, some bread, and the right to keep any teeth that fall out mid-session. Not worth updating your LinkedIn for. Your first client is brought in, blindfolded, gagged, clearly terrified. You're told she's a witch. Why? She had a cat, muttered in Latin, and didn't laugh at the Baron's joke. Classic witch behavior. Your hands shake as you approach. You don't feel powerful. You feel gross. And then the weirdest thing, she smiles. Just a little. Maybe she's truly unafraid. Or maybe she knows something you don't. Either way, it throws you. And now you have to act like you've done this 100 times before while desperately trying to remember which lever on the rack tightens which limb. No pressure. You survive your first day. Barely. Your tunic is stained, your hands are raw, and your mind is trying not to replay the screaming on a loop. You stagger home, if you even have a home anymore, and collapse onto a lice-infested straw mat. Sleep doesn't come easy. You're not a monster. You're just a person with a job no one should have. And you know what's worse? Tomorrow, you have to do it again. Because once you're in this world, you don't leave it. Not alive anyway. You're up before sunrise, which is annoying because the dungeon doesn't exactly have windows. Time doesn't mean much when you live beneath stone and shrieks. But the bells above are ringing, and that means you're late. Again, you yank on your damp tunic. still carrying yesterday's regrets, and head toward the chamber for what your boss calls instrumental familiarization. Sounds fancy. It's not. This morning is your crash course in the gear you'll be using. Lucky you. Your first lesson. Don't touch the hot ends. Seems obvious, but you'll still do it at least once because someone left the iron too close to the torch. And now your fingers are a mix of blister and shame. Your mentor, a man missing 2 toes and most of his moral compass, points to the corner where your starter kit sits, wrapped in a leather roll. You kneel and open it like a macabre Christmas present. Inside, there's the usual thumb screws, a pair of iron tongs, a rusted knife that's somehow more jagged than serrated, and something that looks like a miniature bear trap. That's for tongues, he says. You nod like that makes perfect sense, because asking follow-up questions only earns you suspicion. The star of today's lineup is the pear of anguish. It's not a fruit. It's a metal blossom designed to be inserted, let's just say, where pears should never go, and then cranked open. Its purpose, mostly symbolic. It's not always lethal, but it makes a point. And the sound it makes, somewhere between a wine cork popping and your soul leaving your body. Historians still argue whether the pear was widely used or just a warning prop, but holding one in your hand makes it real enough. You wonder who thought of this. Was there a brainstorming session? A medieval Shark Tank pitch? Next, the rack. You've seen this before. Popular in tavern stories and peasant nightmares. It's basically a big wooden table with pulleys at either end. Strap someone down, turn the wheel, and stretch them until they remember they were part of some evil plot. You're warned, don't overdo it. A dislocated limb is persuasive. A detached one is paperwork. You also get acquainted with the Judas cradle. Just the name makes you wince. It's a pyramid-shaped seat, sharp at the top. The accused is lowered onto it, and gravity does the rest. Good for stubborn folks, says your guide, while chewing something that might be leather. You try not to imagine the sound it makes when someone lands. As you inspect a row of spiked collars, something catches your eye. A delicate saw, nearly polished. That's for heretics, he explains. We start at the middle and work down. You feel your stomach lurch. This is not what you imagined when you applied for government work. But wait, there's more. He opens a locked cabinet like he's unveiling a secret wine cellar. Inside, Iron Maidens, Scavenger's Daughters, and a nasty little item called the Breast Ripper. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. You think you might faint, but there's no time. The next client is already en route, and you need to prep your tools like a sadistic sous chef. You spend the next hour polishing metal, testing hinges, and double-checking ropes. A candle flickers beside you, melting into a wax puddle shaped like a screaming face. Purely coincidental, you hope. You're told to listen to the tools, feel them in your hand, learn their weight. A proper torturer doesn't fumble, says the monk-turned-madman. It ruins the mood. You wonder aloud whether this much gear is really necessary. Can't you just yell at someone until they confess? He snorts. The idea isn't truth. It's spectacle. You need them scared enough to scare others. That's when you realize your job isn't just pain. It's theater. Bloody, twitchy theater. And you're the lead actor. Some tools are more psychological. The iron spider, for example, was used more for show than use. Sharp metal prongs shaped like a claw, presented as a threat. Sometimes, just dangling it in front of a prisoner's face would be enough. But you're warned not to rely on fear alone. Too much bluffing, he says, and you'll be the next one strapped down. There's a debate still going on in academic circles. Was torture more symbolic than effective? Did it really work? Or was it just a power play wrapped in sanctified cruelty? Your experience says both. By midday, your hands are sore from cranking and lifting and testing. You've accidentally sliced your thumb on something called a tongue tearer. And when you try to wipe off the blood, it only smears worse. You begin to understand why torturers had short lifespans and even shorter friendships. You finally break for a watery beer and some stale bread. You sit near the furnace and watch the glow of red-hot irons like someone gazing into a really bad life choice. The tools you've touched today are etched into your mind now. You'll dream about them. You'll flinch whenever someone says pear. And the worst part, You still haven't met the dentist-looking contraption in the back closet mocked advanced use only. Sleep tight. You shuffle back into the torture chamber after your meager lunch and instantly regret it. The air hits you like a damp slab. A mix of wet limestone, mildew, old sweat, and something that definitely used to be human. Welcome to your workplace. A torture chamber that feels less like a job site and more like a sentient, angry basement. This place isn't some sleek underground lair with moody candlelight and symmetrical instruments of doom. No, it's a lumpy, dripping cave carved out of stone by people who didn't believe in ergonomic design. The ceiling's low enough to make you duck at random intervals. The floor is slick with, well, best not to speculate. Even the walls seem to weep. Honestly, it's like a dungeon designed by someone who lost a bet with God. The first thing you notice, again, is the smell. No matter how many rushes of cold, clean air you beg the guard upstairs to let in, the stink clings like guilt. It's rot, yes, but also panic. That specific chemical fear sweat people give off right before they confess to stealing a goat and plotting to assassinate the king. You light the torches, and they sputter, unwilling. Everything down here is reluctant, even the fire. And then there are the sounds. Chains rattle faintly, even when no one's touching them. Drips echo like a ticking clock that forgot how time works. Every once in a while, you swear you hear breathing, but you're alone. Where you're supposed to be. Some say these places are haunted. Honestly, it'd be weirder if they weren't. You've heard stories from fellow torturers about doors slamming on their own, tools vanishing, even the occasional whisper in a language no one spoken since Charlemagne. Historians still argue whether these stories were fear-fueled exaggerations or a kind of psychological penance. But you, working here day after day, know this. If ghosts exist, they hang out exactly here. And it's crowded, not with people, but with leftover presences. Each stone remembers. You've seen scorch marks that don't clean, rusty stains that never quite fade. Even the rats give you the side eye, like the monster here. Which, honestly, fair. At least the spiders don't judge. There's one on your boot now. You flick it off half-heartedly and go about organizing the manacles. The tools aren't the only things that squeak. The cell doors groan like they're auditioning for a horror play. Your keyring weighs more than your conscience, and still somehow doesn't have the right key when you need it. You do your rounds, checking the chains for rust, the rack for tension, the branding irons for sufficient sag gleam. Everything's in order. Unfortunately, then you find the bucket. The bucket, the one that no one ever wants to clean. It's a basic torture method. Place a rat inside it. Hold the bottom against someone's bare stomach. Then heat the outside of the bucket until the rat panics and digs the only way it can in. A fringe method, often questioned by scholars for its feasibility. But you've seen the aftermath. Feasible or not, it's horrifying. You place the bucket back, hands trembling slightly. And that's when you hear it, a faint whisper, behind you. But when you spin around, no one's there. Just a dangling chain gently swinging, like it remembers movement. This happens more often now. The place gets in your head, not with grand jump scares, but with the slow, creeping dread of being watched by the walls themselves. Today's client is late, so you pass the time oiling the scavenger's daughter, a device meant to fold the body inward, compressing rather than stretching. Invented, allegedly, to counterbalance the rack. Because medieval engineers believed in torture diversity, apparently. You place the cleaned iron cuffs gently back on the table. That's when you notice something odd, a footprint in the dirt that isn't yours. Bare, small, recent. You blink. Maybe the last prisoner? But this cell hasn't been used in days. You call up to the guard. He chuckles. Oh, that again. Probably just old air currents. You both know that doesn't make sense, but no one wants to investigate. Because what if it isn't air? It's not just fear or superstition. Some torturers, those older than you, the ones who've lasted far too long, speak of the residue. A psychic fog. They say you inhale enough of it and you start seeing things. Hearing things. Even dreaming other people's pain. Is it real? Or just occupational madness? Historians still argue whether prolonged exposure to dungeons like this caused genuine psychological disorders or simply amplified the guilt already brewing inside. Either way, you're not sleeping tonight. The torchlight dims slightly, and for a second, you see a shadow move in a way that doesn't make spatial sense. It flickers wrong. You close your eyes, count to 5, open them. It's gone. Just a trick of the light. You tell yourself that every day, and you never quite believe it. Eventually, the prisoner arrives. You perform your routine. Ask the questions. Apply the necessary encouragement. She's too far gone to scream. Just stares at you with the kind of eyes that never forget. You finish quickly. You don't want to be in this room any longer than necessary. Afterward, you clean the instruments. Alone. Again, the drip, drip, drip continues. You pretend it's water. You pretend a lot of things now. You head out past the walls that sigh. Past the iron door that locks on its own sometimes. Past the spot where a candle refuses to stay lit. And for a moment, just a moment, you think you hear laughter. Not joyful, not cruel, just tired, just like you. You're summoned before sunrise again, and this time, it's not to the dungeon. You're ordered upstairs, above ground, where the air smells like manure and smoke instead of decay and damp despair. The change of scenery doesn't help. Today, you're meeting the one person who terrifies you more than your tools, your boss. He's not some masked executioner or a grizzled knight with a scary mustache. No, your superior is a bishop, and not the kindly, bless you my child kind. This one wears gold rings and has a smile sharp enough to cut rope. You were hoping for at least a neutral supervisor, someone who'd grunt and nod, maybe hand you a bonus now and then. Instead, you got a man of the cloth who believes pain is a shortcut to the soul. He greets you in Latin, but with the tone of someone used to barking orders at people tied to posts. We do God's work, he says, sipping wine before most people are even awake. Don't forget that. You smile, not because you believe him, but because you like having knees. Clerical involvement in torture? Oh yes, back in the day, church officials didn't just approve of it, they directed it. Especially during inquisitions. Torture was a righteous tool to root out heresy and sin. Historians still argue whether the church officially condoned the worst of it or just conveniently looked away. But the fact remains, many torturers reported directly to holy men who blessed their efforts, and sometimes even selected the tools. And your boss? He's the kind who likes to watch. Not in a creepy way, well, maybe also in a creepy way, but officially he's there to witness that everything is done properly. His presence is supposed to keep things within the bounds of faith. Spoiler, it doesn't. Today, he's reviewing your last few confessions. He flips through parchment stained with sweat and blotches that aren't quite ink. This one confessed too fast, he says, raising an eyebrow. And this one didn't survive. Shame. You try to explain that the woman was already half dead when they brought her in. He waves it off. Next time, try confession before expiration. He sets down the scroll, clasps his ringed hands, and leans in. Torture is not for punishment. It is for purification. You nod, resisting the urge to mention that most of the purified smell like roast beef when you're done. He goes on to talk theology. You half listen. Something about sin leaving the body through pain. That truth only emerges when flesh is humbled. You wonder quietly how he sleeps at night. Then you remember, probably on silk sheets, under a roof paid for by confiscated heretic property. When he finishes, he blesses you. Not emotionally, literally. He makes the sign of the cross and touches your forehead with 2 fingers that feel cold, even through your sweat. Go in faith, he says. Faith, sure. Or fear in a cassock. On your way back down to the dungeon, you pass a novice monk scrubbing steps. He won't look at you. Not because he's shy, because he knows what you do. The church may employ you, but it doesn't mean it accepts you. You're like a mop, useful but dirty. And here's the twist. Some bishops enjoyed the theater of torture a little too much. The one in the next town over-reportedly kept a personal collection of tongue screws. Another had a preferred scream pitch and complained when the acoustics weren't quite right. Of course, this is fringe behavior. Probably. But it makes you wonder how much of this divine business is actually politics in disguise. Today's session involves a tailor accused of spreading heretical texts. Translation. He sold a book the wrong noble didn't understand. Your orders are to get a confession without permanent damage. As if people bounce back from a heretic's fork like they're walking off a stubbed toe. The bishop comes down to observe. You stand in the corner, hands clasped, reciting prayers under his breath as you crank the wheel. The tailor screams. The bishop doesn't flinch. You don't look at your boss. You don't need to. You can feel his presence behind you like a second shadow, watching, judging, maybe enjoying. It's hard to tell which is worse. The confession comes quickly. You're not even sure it's real, but it checks the right boxes. The bishop nods approvingly, then glides out of the room like this was a Sunday stroll. You're left there, breathless, wondering what exactly just happened. You start to realize something disturbing. You're less afraid of the pain than of the approval. When a bishop praises you, it doesn't feel good. It feels like sinking. On your way back up for air, you pass the chapel. The choir is singing. Sweet, clean voices rising to heaven. Just 10 feet above, where someone's knee was shattered for truth. You can't tell if it's irony or design. There's a Latin phrase carved into the archway, fiat voluntas Dei. Let God's will be done. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. You're halfway through your second week when you discover what no one warned you about, the paperwork. Somehow, the screams were easier. At first, you thought being a torturer meant just, well, the torturing. Twist a few knobs, maybe pull a few fingernails and call it a day. But no, there's a whole bureaucracy behind your job. Turns out, medieval torture wasn't just brutal. It was deeply administrative. The first scroll is 3 feet long, and that's just to record a single confession. You sit on a crooked stool by candlelight, ink pot at your side, nib pen in hand. The quill keeps splitting. The parchment smells like mildew, and your desk is suspiciously sticky. This is your new reality. Chronicling who screamed what and when, while trying not to get ink mixed up with other substances. You begin name, occupation, crime accused of, date and time of torture, instruments used, duration, confession summary, notes on physical state, and finally, the dreaded signature of the torturer. That's you, by the way, signing documents that will go in some dusty archive until someone loses track of them or accidentally uses them to wrap fish. Your handwriting starts off neat, earnest even. By the second scroll, it's basically a line of squiggles held together with desperation. Your ink runs out halfway through a sentence, and you consider switching to blood just to be efficient. But no, that's frowned upon. Ink is for writing. Blood is for other things. And here's a thing you weren't ready for. You're expected to quote the confessions verbatim, word for word, even if the accused is sobbing, mumbling, or screaming in Latin. You're now a stenographer of suffering. Some torturers had scribes to do this for them, but you're still low tier, working your way up the dismemberment ladder. So you do both, inflict and document, all while trying not to smudge ink with your elbow or cry into your parchment. Historians still argue whether these written records were reliable or manipulated to serve political ends. You've already seen confessions edited after the fact, sentences changed, crimes added. One peasant admitted to theft. 3 days later, the parchment claimed he conspired with demons. Spelling suspiciously improved, too. You're learning. Truth in the torture world is elastic. Sometimes the worst part is transcribing this spiritual approval section. That's where you have to note which priest or bishop observed the session and confirm that no undue force was applied. You pause, while hovering. Undo is doing a lot of work in that sentence. But you write anyway, because not writing it means you're next in line for the rack. The paperwork isn't just for Inquisition purposes. It also ensures no two torturers use unauthorized methods. That's right, there are rules. In an ironic twist, medieval torture was a regulated industry. Too much damage without approval, you get fined. Or worse, you get sent to a tribunal. You learn about a guy in the next village who added a personal invention to the tool roster. Something involving sheep intestines and boiling vinegar. It worked too well. He was tried for unsanctioned cruelty. Historians still debate whether he was executed or just demoted to dung shoveler. You make a mental note, no freelancing. Another piece of your paperwork is the pre-torture wellness check. It's laughably official. Before you touch a prisoner, you're required to record their physical state. Strong heartbeat? No visible illness? Limbs attached? Check, check, and check. Because God forbid you twist an already twisted ankle. Then there's the confession log. You must tally the truths extracted, how many names given, how many heresies confessed, how many plot details revealed. If the numbers look low, you get called in. Work more thoroughly, they tell you, as if people come with confessions inside them, like coins in a purse. One confession scroll has a doodle on the margin, something vaguely horse-shaped. You didn't draw it, neither did the scribe, and now you're too afraid to erase it. Sometimes you catch yourself copying down screams as if they were dialogue. Isn't a word, but you've spelled it 15 different ways now. One day, you write, "Please stop," 6 times before realizing it was never said. It was just echoing in your mind. But here's the twisted bit. Eventually, the paperwork starts to comfort you. It's methodical, clean, detached. You start looking forward to the part of your day that involves a quill instead of a hook. You keep a secret notebook under your mattress. In it, you sketch the devices you hate most. You write fake names, Sir Pain-a-Lot and Baroness Spiky, to make the job feel slightly less monstrous. You even write letters to no one in particular. "Dear whoever finds this, I didn't mean for this to be my life." You never sign them. One evening, you're up late filing a particularly gruesome confession. You reach for the next parchment and freeze. Your name is already written on it. Same handwriting, same ink. You stare at it for a long time. Then you burn it in the corner brazier. Could have been a prank. Could have been worse. Either way, you don't mention it. In the end, your job is only half iron and fire. The other half is ink and guilt. One lasts longer than the other. Another sunrise, another heretic. You barely finish your watery beer before they bring in a trembling girl with straw in her hair and a black cat in her arms. She's accused of witchcraft. Of course, because nothing says threat to society like talking to a cat and making cough syrup out of thyme and rainwater. You sigh. Witch hunts are in full swing now, and business is booming. Your workspace feels busier than ever. More guards, more scrolls, more villagers peeking through cracks in the doorway just to catch a glimpse of someone evil. It's not justice anymore, if it ever was. It's theater, fueled by fear, boredom, and bad dreams. The church is obsessed. The local nobles are suspicious. Even the peasants who barely own shoes are pointing fingers. You think it's going to calm down? Think again. This is mass paranoia, and you're the guy with the spotlight and the iron tongs. Witch hunting wasn't some fringe fad. It was a whole infrastructure. Clergy, judges, torturers, record keepers. Each accusation was like lighting a match in a hayloft. It spread fast. Historians still argue whether the surge in witch trials during the late Middle Ages was fueled more by theology, misogyny, or economic instability. Likely, all 3 joined hands and did a cursed little jig. You meet your latest client in the cell. She's 17, maybe, accused of flying, talking to animals, and, most dangerously, being unmarried and clever. Her neighbors said she made a woman's pregnancy easier. Can't have that now, can we? You ask the routine questions, but you already know the script. She denies everything. You don't believe her. Or rather, you don't believe you're allowed to believe her. Because here's the thing. During witch hunts, innocence was suspicious. Denial was just a slower confession. Silence? Even worse. You were expected to extract a confession no matter what. Failure made you look suspicious. You wouldn't want anyone asking you where you were during last week's full moon, would you? You begin the process gently, comparatively. A little cold water, a little stress position. Nothing too fancy, but she's strong. And not in the magical sense, just in the human, stubborn sense. She has nothing to confess. So you bring out the checklist. Yes, an actual list. Boil test. Thumb screws. Iron chair. Sleep deprivation. Confession under duress, part 2. Sleep deprivation is your personal least favorite. It feels the most manipulative. No screams, no spectacle, just slow erosion. You force someone to stay awake for days. No light, no sense of time. Eventually, they confess just to be allowed to close their eyes. You sit across from her, candle flickering. You ask her again if she's a witch. She smiles sadly and shakes her head. Don't let me die for a lie, she whispers. You don't reply. You can't, because now the line between their suffering and your obedience is just a blur of shadows and echoes. The bishop wants names. You tell him she hasn't confessed. He frowns. She will. They always do. He's not wrong. Eventually, she mutters something, possibly a prayer, maybe a name. It's unclear, but that's enough. Now there's a new person to bring in, and the cycle continues. You mark it down in a log. Name, date, method, confession, vague but serviceable. You wipe your quill and try not to notice your own reflection in the ink. You see her again later, or rather, what's left of her, dragged to the square for public penance. She's barefoot, filthy, a sign hung around her neck that says wish. The crowd jeers. Some throw rotten food. One child spits. You make eye contact for half a second, and you see it, the flicker of betrayal. Not rage, just resignation. You look away. So does she. And now you're noticing it more often. The volume of accusations is increasing. It used to be a handful a month. Now it's daily. Women mostly. Elderly healers. Midwives. Girls who danced alone in the forest. One man was accused because his beard looked suspiciously forked. You're not even sure what that means. You start calling it torture season. Your fellow torturers laugh grimly. There's even a betting pool. Who'll break fastest? Who's accused will survive the longest. It's sick, but so are you apparently. You're part of the system now, and the system has momentum. One day, a noble woman is brought in. That's rare. Highborns usually buy their way out of trouble. But this one angered the wrong clergyman. You're told to be respectful with her, which, translated, means don't leave visible marks. So you rely on the subtle stuff, like isolation and gaslighting. You whisper the same lie to her until she repeats it. Then you write it down as truth. You realize the worst torture isn't physical. It's breaking someone's reality, making them question what's real and what's forced. At night, you try to sleep, but your dreams are crowded. Not with screams, but with faces. Quiet ones, disappointed ones. You wake up unsure whether you dreamed it or just remembered it. You once believed, at least vaguely, that your job was to protect people. Now you're not even sure from what. Demons? Heresy? Cats? Your supervisor says you're doing well, that you're efficient, that you've helped keep the town safe. From what? From herbal tea and Latin prayers? Sometimes, it feels like you're torturing the town's reflection of its own fear. The accused are just mirrors, and you're the one breaking them. And the worst part? You're good at it now. You're tired. Not just physically, though your shoulders ache and your hand are a mess of blisters and calluses, but somewhere deeper, somewhere harder to clean. And today, you get to deal with the one scenario every torturer dreads, when torture doesn't go to plan. Let's start with the worst-case outcome. You walk into the chamber, the ropes are set, the fire's going, and your client is seated, though reluctantly. You begin as usual. Formal questions, record-keeping, the opening threat. And then you start the process. Gentle at first. Controlled. You know the thresholds by now, or at least you think you do. But then crack. Too soon. Too fast. You hear the sound you weren't supposed to hear yet. A pop, a sharp gasp, and then silence. He slumps. He's not dead. Not yet. But close enough that nothing else will come out of him. No names, no confessions, no heresies or regrets. Just shallow breaths and an inconvenient, unconscious body. You freeze, because this is not ideal. The guards look at you. One raises an eyebrow. Do we start over? You resist the urge to roll your eyes. You can't start over if the suspect can't start. You drag a bucket of water over. Splash him. Nothing. You check his pulse. Weak, irregular. And now you're panicking because you know what happens when you botch a confession. You don't just get a scolding. You get reviewed. And if your bishop is in a particularly pious mood, review means suddenly the torturer becomes the tortured. Here's the truth. The body is unpredictable. Even with all your practice, all your pacing, every person breaks differently. Some scream after one twist. Some endure hours without a word. And sometimes the body just gives up Historians still argue whether medieval torturers aimed for true confessions or simply usable ones. But from your end of the crank handle, the line gets blurrier by the day. You're not sure anyone knows what true means anymore. You drag the man to the corner cot. He moans weakly. The guard takes over. Try to revive him while you flip through the confession notes and try to salvage something. Anything, even a whispered name, would help. But nope, nothing. He's gone full vegetable. This is what you call the backfire. And then there are the other kind, the ones who talk too much. Take last week's baker. Small man, soft hands, accused of selling bread laced with bewitching powder. It was nutmeg. You applied the iron boot just gently. He screamed, then confessed to being in league with forest demons, a murder from 12 years ago for adulterous affairs, and, somehow, helping assassinate a duke who, according to every record, is still alive. You had to pause halfway and ask him, "Wait, are you making this up?" He nodded while sobbing. "Yes, I just wanted to stop." You still had to write it down. The bishop ordered an investigation. They arrested a random tree seller based on one of the confessions. And you were asked to speak less next time. You can't win. Confessions are currency, but the mint is broken. Too little, and they blame you. Too much, and it becomes satire. Sometimes, the accused recant later. One woman told you, through broken teeth, that she only confessed to witchcraft because the alternative was listening to the bishop's sermon again. You wrote it down, in Latin, just for the irony. The worst, though, are the ones who die on the rack. Mid-sentence, you're halfway through a question. They scream, they shudder, and then gone. You don't want to say it out loud, but part of you is almost impressed by the human body's ability to just give up. Of course, this isn't just an inconvenience. It's a liability. Dead suspects don't name co-conspirators. Dead suspects don't donate land post-confession. Dead suspects don't generate paperwork, which is suspicious in itself. So you've developed techniques, slowing the rhythm, rotating tools, creating illusions of intensity while doing less actual damage. It's an art, really, like souffle, but with bones. But even then, you can't predict the moments when it all falls apart. Like the time you were mid-interrogation and the prisoner just laughed. Not maniacally, not fearfully, just a soft, tired chuckle. "I'm already in hell," he said. "You can't do worse." You didn't know what to say. You actually stopped and looked around the room, wondering if maybe he was right. Another man started confessing before you even touched him, admitted to a dozen heresies, then burst into tears and told you none of it was true. He just wanted someone to listen. You didn't know whether to comfort him or report him. So you did both. The higher-ups don't like this ambiguity. They want results, not ethics. If someone dies too early, it's your fault. If someone lies, it's your fault. If someone survives and recants in front of a crowd, well, that's public humiliation and you might get reassigned to leech wrangling duty. You've considered quitting. Once. Briefly. But there's no exit interview from this job. You know too much. You've done too much. And worst of all, you're really good at it now. So you double-check your next victim's vitals. You slow the pace. You go for the wrist first, just discomfort, nothing damaging. You speak in a calm voice. You coax, not crush. And you hope they talk before they pass out. Because in your line of work, backfires aren't just mistakes. They're invitations for karma to turn the crank on you. You start seeing them in your dreams now. Not just the people, you expect them, honestly, but the sounds. The groaning of the winch. The hiss of hot iron and water. That slow, dragged-in breath someone takes right before they break. And you're not sleeping well. It doesn't matter how thick the straw is or how many cups of mead you down before bed. When your job is to unravel people, your brain doesn't let you forget it just because it's dark outside. You lie awake in your tiny chamber above the kitchens, staring at the cracked ceiling and hoping the rats in the wall have the decency to be quiet tonight. Spoiler, they don't. There's a rhythmic tapping somewhere in the beams above. Could be a loose shutter. Could be your imagination. Either way, you're exhausted, and you'd give anything for a full night's sleep. But it's not happening. Why? Because your mind is still working the rack, even when your hands aren't. Every creak of wood reminds you of dislocated shoulders. Every breeze across your cheek reminds you of someone begging to see daylight one last time. Even the sound of a distant bell tolling makes you tense up because bells mean appointments, and appointments mean more clients. Sleep is for people with clean consciences and unbloodied boots. You are neither. Some of the older torturers have tricks. One guy swears by placing lavender under his pillow. Another recites dirty limericks until he passes out. You tried both. Now your room smells like a nervous flower shop, and you've memorized 12 obscene poems about fishmongers. Still wide awake. One man even suggested stuffing garlic in your ears. Keeps the spirits out, he said. You tried it once. It mostly kept people out, which, ironically, was the best sleep you ever had. But dreams? They don't care about garlic. You keep seeing the same dream. You're walking through the dungeon, but empty. Tools hanging motionless. Chains still. No moaning. Just silence. And then you see a chair. Someone's in it. You approach. It's you. Sitting. Bound. Watching yourself walk closer. You always wake up before anything happens. Historians still argue whether medieval torturers suffered psychological trauma like modern executioners or if the religious fervor of the time acted like emotional armor. Some think they disassociated. Others believe their minds simply cracked. You don't know which group you fall into yet, but you're definitely cracking at the edges. You start seeing glimpses during the day, too. That prisoner with the crooked smile? You see her face in the baker's wife. The monk who moans in prayer during Mass. Sound just like the man you accidentally broke to early last week. Even music bothers you now. You used to hum tavern tunes while sharpening blades. Now every cheerful melody sounds like a mockery. You hear laughter and you flinch. Sleep deprivation is a method you've used on others. Funny how poetic it is that now it's being used on you by your own brain. Turnabout is fair play, apparently. You start keeping odd hours. Visiting the chamber when no one's around. Polishing tools you won't use for days. Arranging manacles like someone setting the table for a guest they secretly dread. At first, people think you're being diligent, dedicated. The bishop praises your devotion, but then they notice the bags under your eyes. The way your hands tremble slightly when no one's watching. How you sometimes pause mid-sentence, like you're trying to remember if you're awake. One night, you try sleeping outside the city walls, just to hear crickets instead of screams. You lie under the stars, which are shockingly bright without torch smoke in the air. For a moment, you feel peace. Then you remember a woman you once interrogated who described the stars as God's watchful eyes. You don't sleep a minute. You return before sunrise, covered in dew, and someone jokes you look like a ghost. You don't laugh. There are tiny hallucinations now. A whisper here, a movement just at the edge of vision. One morning, you swear you see blood on your hands, even though you haven't worked in 2 days. You scrub and scrub, but the phantom stain remains. Your fellow torturers joke about it, at first. Then one of them stops coming to work. They find him wandering the woods a week later, muttering about being judged by the iron. He won't make eye contact with anyone. He flinches at the sound of metal. They say he was one of the best, and now he spends his days talking to trees. You wonder if that's your future, too. You try confession, sit in the chapel, whisper to the priest through the little wooden screen. He doesn't even flinch when you describe what you've done. God forgives all who repent, he says. You want to believe him. You need to believe him. But it feels like your soul is a sponge, soaked in everything you can't wring out. You've heard of something called torturer's insomnia, a kind of living purgatory where you're too tired to function, but too haunted to sleep. There's no cure, just time, or death, whichever shows up first. You stare at the ceiling again. Wonder how many nights you've counted cracks. Wonder what would happen if you just kept walking one day. Left, vanished into the hills. But you don't, because morning always comes. And so does another client. And you're always awake. You walk into the market square for a loaf of bread, hoping, just hoping, you can buy it without anyone hissing at you. No such luck. The vendor eyes you like you just coughed on his apples. Out of bread, he says, while standing behind an entire basket of the stuff. You don't argue. You're used to it now. Your reputation, utterly wrecked. Not because you're bad at your job, but because you're good at it. Everyone knows your face. You're the guy people look away from at church. Children whisper about you. One even ran off screaming just because you scratched your neck too fast. You weren't always like this. You used to be part of this town. You had friends. You had a life. Now, you're more ghost than man, and you're still breathing. You try to walk with your head down, cloak pulled up, hood on. Doesn't help. You're tall and unfortunately memorable. One woman spits when she sees you. Another makes the sign of the cross. A group of boys mimic screaming as you pass. Very subtle. Very mature. You'd think people would be grateful. After all, you're keeping them safe. Right? That's what your bishop says every time he pats you on the back with those cold little fingers. But no, you're not a hero. You're not even a necessary evil. You're just evil. Even the rats like you better than people do. There's a weird double standard in this line of work. They want someone to take care of witches and heretics and treasonous whispers. But they also want that someone to disappear immediately after. Like the pain must be delivered by a faceless hand. A shadow. Not a person who might show up at the same tavern later and ask for stew. You tried tavern visits for a while. It went poorly. The first time, no one sat near you. The second, someone dropped a chicken bone in your ale. The third, someone lit your cloak on fire and called it an accident. You don't go anymore. So now you eat alone. In a corner. From a cold bowl. Usually whatever the kitchen servants can spare. Even they avoid you. One girl dropped her ladle once when she saw your hands. You get it. You've seen your hands, too. Historians still argue whether torturers were social pariahs in most communities or if their isolation came more from personal guilt than public hatred. You can now confirm it's both. The guilt builds a wall, and the whispers just decorate it. Even the guards, your supposed comrades, keep their distance. They'll nod, maybe, but no one slaps you on the back or jokes around anymore. You're not part of their world. You're the weird uncle who shows up to family dinners with a suitcase full of fingernail pliers. You think about disguises. A mask. A different name. But what would be the point? Your walk alone is recognizable now. The slow, careful gait of someone used to moving around shackled bodies and ducking under low beams. One evening, you overhear a couple in the square. She says, "That's him." He replies, "Don't look." You weren't even doing anything. Just standing there, buying turnips. Not even the suspicious kind. You want to scream. I'm just a person. But are you? There's this old superstition in town. People say if you make eye contact with the torturer, you'll have nightmares. You don't know who started it. Maybe you did. Subconsciously. You think back to the time before this job. What were you even doing? Farming? Hauling grain? Something with dirt and fresh air. You miss dirt. It was honest. Now, your world is clean metal, blood, and side eyes. One child stays at you too long and asks, "Do your hands burn?" His mother yanks him away before you can answer. You were going to say no, that it's your soul that burns. You get home, if you can call your drafty stone closet a home, and find someone scrawled something on your door. It's a crude drawing. A man on a rack. Probably you. The artistic anatomy is wildly inaccurate, but the message is clear. We see you. You leave it there. Scrubbing it off feels like pretending. You wonder what would happen if you were accused. How fast the town would turn. You already know the answer. They'd cheer, bake pies, probably throw a festival. You keep a journal now. You write down people's reactions. The way they flinch. The way they pretend they didn't see you. One page just says, "I don't exist outside the chamber." You try smiling more, being polite, holding doors. No one thanks you. One woman clutched her child tighter just because you said good morning. You laugh bitterly. You could be the most charming man in the county and it wouldn't matter. You've crossed a line, and not just a moral one. You are the hand of punishment. But hands aren't people. They are tools. And tools don't get dinner invitations. One night, you sit on a bench outside the chapel, just to breathe. A man joins you, cautiously. An old one, with cloudy eyes and a kind voice. "Bad job you've got," he says. You nod. "You know," he continues, "some say the ones who do the worst things carry the pain so others don't have to." You look at him. He's not smiling, not judging, just seeing you. It's the first time in months someone talks to you like you're real. Then he walks away. You sit there a long time. And for once, the silence doesn't feel like a punishment. You check your pouch. 1, 2, 4 copper coins. That's it. That's your entire pay for last week's confessions, 2 successful extractions, and 1 extremely awkward inquisition involving a goat, 3 wigs, and a minor baron. You flip the coins in your hand like maybe they'll multiply. They don't. Turns out, being the most feared man in town doesn't come with great benefits. No one becomes a torturer for the money, but you hoped it'd be better than this. After all, you're doing dirty, dangerous, soul-numbing work. But the pay? Inconsistent, arbitrary, and often paid in-kind contributions like stale cheese or a cask of something technically drinkable. Last month, you were paid in salted fish, which would have been fine, except you don't like fish. And salt makes your hands crack more than they already do. Your barber won't even see you anymore. Not because of the smell, because of the reputation. Apparently, you're bad for business. Some weeks, you're told the town treasury is tight. That's their way of saying, thanks for protecting our fragile moral order. Here's nothing. Other times, your payment comes from confiscated property. If there's any left after the bishop, the mayor, and the scribe take their share. You once got paid with a chipped ceramic rooster. It's still on your shelf. You've named it Sir Screams-a-Lot. Historians still argue whether torturers were on official payrolls or just opportunists paid per confession. In your case, it's both. Technically, you're on a list. But that list gets mysteriously misplaced whenever taxes are due or when the bishop's brother needs a new horse. You tried bringing it up once, politely, of course. I've extracted 7 full confessions this week, you said. Shouldn't there be some form of bonus? The response? A vague shrug and a reminder that your real reward is divine favor. Which is funny, considering divine favor doesn't buy candles or soap. So you pick up extra shifts. You cover for other torturers when they're sick, which usually means drunk or catatonic. You help the guards transport prisoners. Once you even helped build a gallows. Not because you were told to, but because they offered bread and a pair of gloves. The gloves didn't fit. Of course, none of this would matter if you could spend what you earn. But that's another problem. Most merchants don't want your coins. Blood money, they mutter. And while they'll sometimes take your coin with a long sigh and a wiped cloth, you can feel the judgment. You tried tipping once. The barmaid left your drink on the far end of the table and walked away backward. It's not just public spaces either. You need boots? The cobbler suddenly closes every time you appear. Your cloak's torn? The tailor isn't taking commissions. You once tried to barter with a traveling merchant. He traded you 3 apples for your entire week's pay, then offered a prayer as you walked away. You're not a man anymore. You're a warning. And warnings don't get discounts. It's affecting your living conditions, too. Your chamber's drafty, the bed is lumpy, and the mold is spreading like it's on a mission from the Pope. The roof leaks. The rats are louder than the bells. You've tried patching the walls yourself, but mortar costs coin, and coin doesn't stretch far when no one wants to accept it. Once, you were paid with a live chicken. You named it Justice. It lived under your bed for 3 days before escaping through a hole in the wall. You still dream of it sometimes. At this point, you're half considering side work. Not torture exactly, but pain-adjacent services. Rough collections. Private intimidation. Maybe some light dungeon consultancy. You could draw up a decent blueprint for effective but tasteful punishment chambers. At a fountain. Maybe a gift shop. But you don't, because even you have standards. Barely. One day, a nobleman hands you a pouch with 10 silver coins. More than you've ever held at once. He smiles and says, for a little extra encouragement during questioning. You hesitate. You shouldn't take bribes. Then again, is it a bribe if your actual employer isn't paying you? You accept and instantly regret it, because now he owns you, and you know it. He starts requesting special favors. Not torture exactly, just quiet visits, hidden questions, persuasive nudges. You want to say no, but you've already crossed the line. You spend the coin that same night just to be rid of it. You buy bread, ale, a new belt. The next morning, it all tastes sour, because deep down, you know, you've sold your morality for a handful of coins you weren't even allowed to use in public. There's no safety net in your job. No savings. No pension. No exit plan. You're one bad confession away from being unpaid and unprotected. Sometimes you fantasize about faking your death, taking your ceramic rooster and disappearing into the hills, growing carrots, making wine, pretending your hands were never used for anything but harvesting grapes. But then the bell rings. Another client awaits. And once again, you work for scraps. You're working late again because the bishop wants progress, and progress apparently means 3 more interrogations before sunrise. You're half asleep, your fingers sore from the iron crank when you notice it, the strange, sticky patch on your glove. You pull it off to check, and there it is, an angry red blister on your palm, seeping. You sigh. Another infection. You had 5 this month. No one tells you when you take this job that the tools aren't just dangerous to others. They're dangerous to you, especially when you're using them on half-dead bodies, and no one's heard of soap. You stare at your workbench. It's a mosaic of crusted blood, rusted nails, and discarded bandages. One of your hooks is growing something green and fuzzy. It's probably sentient by now. You're cleaning rag? More bacteria than cloth. And guess what? There are no gloves, no aprons, no masks. This isn't a hospital. It's not even a stable. It's just you, your bare hands, and whatever biohazard you poked yesterday. That's the problem with torturing people for a living. You're really close to the worst parts of the human body. Blood, saliva, pus, things that spray when bones crack, and things that leak when it shouldn't. You once leaned over a prisoner just as he coughed into your face. 3 days later, you woke up with a fever so bad you thought you died and been assigned to torture yourself. The other torturers joke about it, call it the rot or dungeon lung. Some get boils. Others get weird rashes. One guy had a black toe for a month and eventually just cut it off himself with a branding iron. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rate among torturers was due to social revenge, stress, or disease. Having worked this job, you're going with yes to all 3. There's no antiseptic, no boiling water, no clean bandages. The only disinfectant is the cheap wine you pour over your cuts while trying not to scream. And yes, it is scream back. Today, your thumb is swollen like a boiled sausage. You can't bend it, but you have work to do, so you wrap it in cloth and hope it doesn't go necrotic. You remember the case of old Matthew, the torturer 3 towns over who lost 2 fingers, then his nose, and finally his mind. They say he started talking to the Iron Maiden, claiming she was his wife. You visited him once. He offered you a soup of sanity made from rat bones. You politely declined. Your own infection is getting worse. You can feel it pulsing. It's hard to hold the tools now without wincing. You try using your left hand. It's clumsier, and you drop a pair of pincers into a chamber pot. You don't fish them out. There's a tool, one you rarely use, called the Spanish tickle. It's a claw-shaped scraper designed to flay skin gently. Ironically, it's the cleanest thing on your rack. Probably because no one wants to touch it. Ever. You wonder sometimes what lives on these tools. Fleas? Mites? Curses? One colleague swore his rack gave him scabies. Another claimed his breast ripper had a personality. You laughed until it slipped from your shelf and almost crushed your foot. Twice. Some nights you sit on your bed and examine your hands. Every knuckle, every scar. You've started naming your fingers. Not out of boredom, just to pretend they're still yours. Index is stabby. Middle is crampy. Ring is useless. Pinky you call Hope. He's the cleanest. You once went a plague doctor. He gave you a vial of something he called preventive vinegar. You drank it. You don't recommend it. It tasted like feet and regret. Still, the thought lingers. What if you're dying? Slowly. From exposure. From filth. From the ghosts in the walls. Maybe you won't get burned at the stake or accused of heresy. Maybe you'll just rot quietly from the inside out. And here's the real kicker. No one will treat you. You're the torturer. If you show up at the apothecary with a rash, he'll run out of herbs. If you go to the healer, she'll mysteriously close for fasting. You're on your own. A leper without the pity. So you start making your own potions. Mostly wine and garlic mashed into lard. It stinks, but sometimes the itching stops. You smear it under your arms, behind your ears, anywhere you've been touched by a client, which is everywhere. You keep a list on the back of a confession scroll. Avoid pus. Don't lick fingers. Always ask where the boils are. Never touch teeth. Teeth are the worst. They bite, they snap, and they're crawling with whatever plague the mouth hasn't swallowed yet. You use tongs now, even if it takes longer. One prisoner had black gums. Another was dripping mucus that steamed when it hit the floor. You wore a scarf over your mouth that day. It didn't help. You still lost your sense of smell for a week. You started boiling your tools. Not because anyone told you to, but because your nose bled when you didn't. You borrowed a pot from the kitchen. They don't know. They'd riot if they did. One night, you wake up in a sweat. Your hand is twice its normal size. The skin is purple veined. You bite a cloth and lance the blister yourself. It smells like something died 3 times inside you. You weep, not from the pain, from the fact that you know how to do this now. There is no healing in your job, only managing the damage. Rot maintenance. And you do it all because someone has to, until your fingers fall off. The boy they bring in today is quiet. Too quiet. And he's wearing shoes that are far too nice for a peasant. You know this type. He's not actually a suspect. He's a noble's nephew. And he's here because someone higher up, probably an annoyed cousin or scheming steward, want a message sent. Quietly, discreetly, without bruises, without scandal, just enough pain to steer him back into obedience. These are the worst jobs. The room is prepared the same way. Tools laid out, fire lit, guards posted at the door. But you already know this won't be normal. You won't be allowed to do your work properly, whatever that even means anymore. You'll have to finesse this. No marks, no screams, no evidence. You nod to the guard who shrugs and says, "Delicate case." You resist the urge to say, "They're all delicate if you pull too hard." Here's the thing. When you're torturing nobility, you're not just bending bodies. You're bending protocol, politics, and power structures you can't see the edges of. One misstep, too much force, a visible bruise, a single word whispered to the wrong relative, and you're the one getting bent next. Historians still argue whether noble suspects were actually tortured or simply interrogated firmly. The truth, is a strange, horrible mix. Sometimes it's real. Sometimes it's theater. Sometimes it's both at once. You've done it before. The Baron's nephew who got caught praying in Greek. The Duchess's son who scribbled heresy in his schoolbook for a joke. You remember each one. Not because they screamed, but because they didn't. They stared at you like you were beneath them, like all this blood and fire was quaint. This boy's the same. Pale, nervous, but not broken. He stares at the tools with distant curiosity, like someone examining a mildly unpleasant sculpture. You ask the routine questions, but they're just performance. He's not going to answer honestly. He's going to wait until his uncle arrives with a pardon and a glare. Until then, you're a tool in the hands of people with titles and too much time. So you begin, gently. A twist here, a suggestion there. No blood, no screams, just discomfort. Enough to say, we could do worse. But not enough for anyone to accuse you of impropriety. It's a tightrope walk, and your hands shake the whole time. You remember the torturer in the next province, Martin, who pulled a confession out of a noble's cousin. It was a good confession, too. Detailed, truthful. The problem? The cousin died. And Martin? He disappeared. Some say he was executed. Others say he was given a fake identity and sent to live among monks. You doubt the monk story. Today, you use the corda, a simple method. You tie the arms behind the back and hoist the prisoner upward by the wrists. It doesn't break the skin, but the pain is exquisite. Dislocates the shoulders if done wrong. Or too long. You do it just for a second. Just enough for the boy's knees to buckle. Then you lower him. He looks at you like you've just tickled him. That it, he says. You smile, but your gut clenches. Because here's the reality. You're not in control here. Not really. In your usual cases, you're the wall. The end of the road. But with nobles, you're just another servant. This boy could have you reassigned with a shrug. Or worse, accused. One day, a noblewoman slaps you across the face during session. "How dare you touch me?" she says, while you're holding her thumb in a vice. You let go instantly. Not because it hurt, because one wrong move, and she screams assault instead of heresy. And now you're the one tied to the chair. She files a complaint anyway. For demeaning contact. You spend 3 days under review, waiting to see if they'll let you return to work or throw you to the mob. Eventually, they send you back. No explanation, no apology. Just try to be gentler next time. You think about that a lot, about how power protects itself. The peasants you interrogate have no shields, no second chances. They break like dry sticks. But the nobles? They float above it all, guarded by layers of privilege and politics. Sometimes you envy them. Sometimes you hate them. But most days you fear them. Today's boy finally confesses to nothing, really. He mumbles an apology for disobeying expectations and says he'll be better. You record it. Your handwriting is perfect. You're not taking any risks. You hand the scroll to the bishop's scribe, who barely glances at it before sealing it with wax. Later, it'll go into an archive no one reads, just in case someone needs to pretend this was all official. Before he leaves, the boy turns to you and smiles. "I won't forget your face," he says. You nod, but inside you shudder, because neither will you. You clean your tools meticulously. The clamps, the cords, the leather straps that were barely used. Not because they're dirty, but because you need them to be spotless. No trace, no question, no evidence. You burn the rags you used. You check your clothes for blood. There isn't any, but you change anyway. You've learned to be extra cautious around noble blood. It stains in different ways. That night, you lie awake again. Not haunted by screams, but by smirks. The look of someone who knows he'll never face consequences. Someone who could end your career with a sentence or a shrug. And the terrifying part? You realize he's right. It's barely dawn when the summons arrives. A letter, sealed with red wax, and the unmistakable crest of the High Tribunal. No signature, no explanation, just 4 words. Prepare for an inquisition. Your stomach drops. You know what that means. The Inquisition isn't just another job. It's not like torturing a miller's wife for owning 2 cats or a farmer for humming suspicious songs. No, this is big. Cloaks and candlelight. Latin chanted through gritted teeth. People who smile while you scream. And worse, politics. The Inquisition was supposed to be about rooting out heresy, about defending the faith. At least, that's what they teach in church. But you know better. You've seen the gears behind the curtain. The Inquisition is about control. Religious, yes, but also legal, social, and political. And you, lucky you, are about to become a very sharp cog in that machine. The bishop doesn't say much, just nods gravely and hands you a fresh robe. Black, heavier than usual, makes you look less like a torturer and more like a scholar of pain. Apparently, that's the vibe they're going for. You arrive at the hall before anyone else. It's a long stone room lined with torches and eyes, real and painted. Scrolls on every wall. Crucifixes looming from every angle. At the center, a chair. Not the comfortable kind. You're told the accused is a former priest. Accused of spreading dangerous interpretations. That's code for. He said something clever in the wrong language to the wrong noble on the wrong feast day. And now you get to ask the questions. The inquisitors enter. Hooded, slow, silent. They take their seats behind a long table. One of them gives you a barely perceptible nod. That's your cue. You ask the priest for his name. He gives it. Calmly. You ask if he confesses. He doesn't. Just smiles and quotes scripture back at you. This is going to be hard. You're not allowed to start with pain. Not right away. The Inquisition has rules. Gradual persuasion, they call it. First, isolation. Then darkness. Then the suggestion of pain. Only when all else fails do you bring out the iron. But they want results. Soon, you move through the motions. Questions. Cold meals. No sleep. The priest stays serene. He speaks in parables. Quotes psalms. Sometimes, you think he's mocking you. Other times, you think he's trying to save you. It's unsettling. You report back to the tribunal. He's not responding. Then escalate, they reply. So you do. You bring out the strappado. Rope tied to his wrists, then pulled over a pulley. You lift him off the ground. His arms strain. Shoulders creak. But he doesn't scream. Instead, he sings. Low. Beautiful. A hymn you haven't heard since you were a child. You drop him. He slumps but still smiles. Now, the whispers start, not from him, from the inquisitors. Some think he's possessed. Others think he's faking. One thinks he might actually be holy. This is the political quagmire. No one can agree, but they need a confession. The bishop wants it. The archbishop wants it. And quietly, so do you. Because if he doesn't confess soon, they'll blame you. Historians still argue whether inquisitions were sincere efforts at moral cleansing or just strategic purges in religious disguise. From where you stand, it's clear this is chess. And you're not the player. You're the pawn with a knife. The priest starts to change. Slowly, he stops quoting scripture, starts muttering. One day, he claims to see angels in the flames. Another day, he accuses you of heresy, says your soul is tethered to screaming. He's not wrong. The inquisitors debate. Do they have enough for a conviction? Is his mind broken or enlightened? You keep working. You try the iron boot, then the rack. You even bring out the pear, just as a visual. He laughs at it, calls it a fool's figure. That night, the bishop visits you privately. You must make him confess, he says, or they'll question why he didn't. You don't sleep. You go back to the chamber. Alone. No witnesses. Just you and the priest. You sit across from him. Why won't you speak? He looks at you, eyes hollow and bright. I have spoken, he whispers. You just didn't hear. And then he falls silent. Forever. He dies the next day. Peacefully. No marks. No gasps. Just gone. The tribunal is furious. They blame the diet, the cell conditions, you, but they also fear him now. His death feels like a statement, like proof of what they can't agree. So they write a vague confession anyway. Stamp it, seal it, burn the body. The story they'll tell is simple. He repented. At the last moment, privately, devoutly, just enough to justify their power. You're dismissed without a word. And that's how it goes with inquisitions. Truth is shaped. Pain is polished. Politics dressed in robes. You return to your dungeon, your regular job, your regular screams. But now, when you walk past the chapel, you glance at the crucifix and wonder, what if that priest was right? Your knees ache more these days. Climbing the narrow steps to the upper tower feels like hauling bricks with your joints. Every time you lean down to adjust a cuff or lift someone off the rack, something cracks. Usually a bone. Not always theirs. Retirement isn't a thing in your profession. There's no pension, no quiet cottage by the sea. No, thank you for your service plaque. Just you, your tools, and a slow grind toward either death or disgrace. You always assumed you'd know when it was time, when your hands shook too much to grip a brand, when your mind wandered mid-interrogation. But here's the problem. You've been shaking. You've been wandering, and no one noticed or cared. They still send you prisoners, still hand you parchment to fill out, still expect results. The only real difference is how long it takes you to recover. You used to bounce back after an all-day session. Now, your back seizes if you sneeze too hard. You mentioned retiring once, just as a joke. The scribe laughed for a full minute, then blinked and asked, "Oh, you were serious?" Turns out, torturers don't get to quit. Not cleanly. The only ones who stop are the ones who disappear, drop dead at their desk, or get accused themselves. And that last one happens more than you'd think. There was old Lyon, who tried to leave and open a wine shop. 6 weeks later, he was accused of practicing alchemy. They found evidence in the form of dusty herbs and a mirror shaped like an owl. You attended his execution. He didn't even look surprised. Historians still argue whether such accusations were deliberate efforts to silence former torturers or just the town's way of recycling paranoia. You know the truth. It was both. When you've spent your life witnessing the system's ugly insides, the system doesn't like you walking away with a memory full of secrets. So you keep working. You adapt. You simplify. You use fewer tools, just the ones you can lift without groaning. You pace yourself. Stretch before and after sessions. You even made yourself a cushion to kneel on. It's stuffed with straw and dignity. The guard call you Gramps. The younger torturers treat you like a relic. One asked if thumbscrews were invented before or after fire. You didn't laugh. He did. For now. Your hands are stiff in the morning. It takes minutes to tie knots that used to take seconds. Your fingers don't just ache. They remember. Each one feels like a journal of pain you didn't write, but had a hold. You've lost track of how many people you've tortured. Hundreds, probably. You stopped counting after your 50th confession. What's the point? Your journal is now filled with notes like left knee popped again, cramped during vice turn, and must boil bandages longer. There's no glory in your work, just habit. Your dreams are slower, too. Less screaming, more staring. Silent faces staring back. Not angry, just watching. You tried mentoring once. Thought maybe teaching someone else the ropes, literally, might give you purpose. The boy was eager. Too eager. He laughed too much. Treated it like a game. You told him to get out before it ruined him. He said, "What's left to ruin?" You didn't answer. You're alone more now. Even the ghosts seem to be giving you space. Maybe they're bored. Maybe they've moved on. Or maybe they're waiting. You sit in the chamber sometimes, not working, just thinking, listening. You hear the drips, the wind, the creak of chains even when they haven't moved. One night, you find a letter on your door. No seal, no name, just a scrap of parchment with 6 words. He who hurts cannot be saved. You don't know who wrote it. Could be anyone. Could be no one. You don't throw it away. The worst part isn't the isolation or the pain or the nightmares. It's the memory. You remember too much. Every face, every scream, the way people begged, the way some just waited for it to end. You even remember the ones who didn't break. Those are the worst. The ones who looked at you and saw past the tools, past the dungeon, and whispered, "You don't have to do this." But you did. You always did. You visit the chapel more often. You don't pray. Just sit. Quiet. You don't expect forgiveness. You don't even believe it exists for you. But it's cooler there. Cleaner. And sometimes that's enough. You think about writing a letter. A confession. Not about the people you broke, but about you. What it's done to you. What you became. You even drafted a few times. But you never sign it. One evening, you watch the sunset from the top tower. Your only real view of the outside world. The sky is streaked with orange and purple. You wonder what it's like to live in a place where no one screams at night. Where you can walk in daylight without glances or whispers. Where your name doesn't taste like iron. And for a moment, just one brief moment, you imagine it. A life where your hands are just hands. Then the bell rings. You rise slowly, bones creaking like old doors. Another confession needs collecting. And you, retired or not, are still the man they call. They bring you in under cover of night. No announcement. No accusations. No dramatic build-up. Just 3 guards at your door and a quiet knock. "Come with us," one says. You know what this is. You always knew. You follow without resistance because you understand how the script goes. You've helped write it 100 times. Maybe more. This is the final act, and you're not surprised. You're not even angry. You're tired. They take you down the same halls you've walked for years. The same steps you counted in your head to stay awake during midnight shifts. The same walls you leaned against, sweaty and shaking, after confessions that went too far. But now, the walls lean away from you. The shadows feel like they're watching for different reasons. They take you through the door you always avoided, the one with no windows, just a small cross carved above the lintel. You remember dragging others through it. Now it's your turn. You don't get to see the tribunal, just a scroll read aloud by a trembling clerk, accused of impiety, misuse of authority, and corruption of sacred office. You try not to laugh. You want to ask, just now noticing, but you bite your tongue. You know the real reason. You're not useful anymore. You've seen too much, heard too much, outlived too many bishops. You know where the bodies are buried. And worse, you remember their names. They want to make a statement, a clean end to a messy legacy. So they do what they always do. They accuse. Historians still argue whether torturers were often turned upon by their employers or if those were rare, poetic anomalies. You now know it's neither. It's inevitability. They strip you of your tools. Not a dramatic scene. Just a quiet confiscation of your keys and satchel. They take your robe, give you a plain shift. No belt, no shoes. The guards don't speak as they lead you down. To the chamber. Your chamber. You don't recognize it at first. Someone's cleaned it. New torches. Rearranged instruments. A scent of rosemary to mask the blood. You spot your old tools on the wall. Labeled now, like museum pieces. One of the younger torturers is waiting. You remember training him. He was the one who asked too many questions and liked the sound of his own hammer. He won't look you in the eye. The bishop watches from the corner. A new one, draped in silk and righteousness. You don't know him. Doesn't matter. They're all the same. The charges are read again. No chance to respond. Just procedure. The boy approaches you with shackles. He hesitates. You raise your wrists before he can fumble. Make it easy. He binds you gently. You hate that. You'd prefer cruelty. At least cruelty's honest. They ask if you confess. You nod. To what? Everything. Nothing. Pick a sin. You sit in the chair, the one you adjusted 100 times for comfort, leverage, reach. It's less comfortable now. They begin. The tools you once wielded now press against you. The familiar coldness of iron. The bite of rope on bone. The creak of tension building. The wet breath of fear, but this time, it's your own. And you realize they won't need to torture you much, because you're already broken. You've been breaking for years. Quietly, efficiently, invisibly. This is just the epilogue. Your mind drifts as the pain begins. You think about the girl with the cat, the priest who sang, the noble boy who smirked, the baker who made up a dozen crimes just to get it over with. They all pass through your hands. Now it's your turn to pass through someone else's. You don't scream. Not at first. Not out of pride, but because it feels familiar. Like hearing a lullaby in a minor key. Eventually, though, your body betrays you. And as the light starts to swim, you remember the dream. The one where you were the one in the chair. Full circle. They always say the wheel turns. Now you know, sometimes it rolls right over you. And now your breath slows. The torchlight dims to a flicker, the echoes fading into silence. That cold stone chamber, the one that never seemed to stop groaning, falls still like it's finally resting too. No more screaming. No more confessions. No more careful steps on blood-worn floors. Just peace. It creeps in gently, like a breeze through a long-closed window. Your eyes drift closed, not from pain this time, but from something quieter, more final. Your body, scarred, worn, and weary, can finally release its grip on the life it's clung to for too long. No more faces staring back in the dark. No more names to record. No more ink to smear. No more whispers behind your back in the market. The world that once knew you, feared you, used you, will soon forget you. And maybe that's mercy. Maybe your name deserves to be lost. Just a faint echo in some half-cracked record buried beneath mildew and moss. But for now, just rest. You've walked through fire, shadows, chains, and regret. And whether you earned peace or not, it has come anyway. Let the silence have you. Let the stone cradle your final breath. And let the night draw its curtain over a life that was never meant to be yours. Sleep now. It's finally over.